Warning: tube amplifiers have lethal voltages inside them. Please do not attempt to build, test, or repair these without understanding and following all safety protocols. Hey y'all, back for video 2 of this build series. Hopefully in this one we'll be able to get the power supply done and get that part of this amp finished up. Hopefully, again, that some of y'all who like these more detailed builds are going to enjoy this little kind of mid-series, mini-series on the actual point-to-point soldering, wiring stuff. And yeah, let's get building. Okay, so we got the AC wiring done, and now we're fixing to do the first filtering capacitor, wire up this choke. Then we'll have all the wiring done to the rectifier tube, and we're going to move on over here to doing the tag strips and start getting that stuff wired up. So first thing we're going to do is, I love this PTFE tubing. I'm going to put a link in the description. Stuff's only like $8 for a big roll of it that lasts a long time, and it's perfect for putting over these leads to kind of protect them, insulate them, and it just makes them look a lot more professional. So we're going to cut a couple of pieces of this off, and it cuts super easy. And it just slides over the pins like that. Just like that, looks perfect. Then the next thing we're going to do is get some of this stuff, Pliobond. It's awesome contact cement. I'll also put a link to this stuff in the description. And just put a little bead on the bottom of that capacitor. Touch it down to where we want it to be on the chassis. And this is kind of a good technique, is just the transfer technique. Then you let this stuff tack up for about a minute, and then just like its name says, it's contact cement. Once it tacks up a little bit and you touch it together, it's glued for good. And it holds in place, and then after 24 hours, the stuff is just nailed down. It's some really strong contact glue. It's also remains slightly flexible, so vibration doesn't hurt it. It's pretty temperature safe, and so it's a good way to nail down components like this so you know they don't move around. So we'll let this tack up and then glue that in place and solder it up. And while we're waiting for that to tack up, we can take this choke lead, pull it over about like that. Cut this one off. Strip it back. Turn my little Hiko soldering iron on, let it get warmed up. And the last thing we're going to have to do over here is run a ground wire from this terminal over to our star ground point that we're going to create when we start with the tag strips, which is the next step in this process. So we're going to get the power supply tag strips all wired up with the voltage divider for the heater, and then we'll be ready for our first power on, and we can test make sure we're getting the voltages to our rectifier. We can make sure that we're getting the heater voltages to the pins that we're expecting, and it's a good idea to just kind of power this thing up as you go through the stages, so that if you do make a mistake, we'll go ahead and pop the fuse early while there's not a lot of wiring in place, and it's a whole lot easier to diagnose. So I think that glue is tacked up enough to come in here and this is our 22 UF 450 volts. And again, even though this amp is not going to be running at 450 volts, on startup, it does go up over 400 volts. And so having 450 volt caps give us some headroom where we never have to worry about the capacitors popping because we tried to spec them too close to what they actually may run at. And solder those two up. I'll come up in here and solder this one capacitor lead. Like that. We got that done, and then like I said, we're going to come in here and hook up a ground lead here, and then the B plus is going to come off of this wire off the other side of the choke over here to our tag strip. So let's move on to setting up these tag strips. Okay, so now we're going to start working on these tag strips, and I'm going to try to do a little different job on especially this one here that's for the heaters, that we ended up using a transformer that doesn't have a center tap for the heaters. We had to add some extra resistors, and the other amp got a little cluttered, and so I'm kind of arranging things a little differently on this one. So first, I've got this little cap here, that's this little film cap that goes between the center of the voltage divider and ground, and we're going to tack this little guy in place down here on the end. Solder the other side of it right here. Just like that. Then the next piece we're going to do is I'm going to be soldering the resistors down here at the bottom. So the other thing that we have also going in the bottom is this little jumper wire that's going to go across to our star ground point. So let's put that in there. Actually, I'm going to put this resistor in, bend the lead over. I'm actually probably going to have to stand it up like this, and then put our little jumper guy in here like this, and then solder that joint up right there. There we go. And then while it's still warm, just like that. And then little resistors in a good spot. Let that cool off a second. And then come in here to that joint. Then let me clip these leads. Let me clip these two little leads. Clip that one. That one. And that one. And the idea is we put the B plus on this one, goes through this 150K resistor, then there's a 30K resistor to ground with this little cap across here to stabilize things. We should end up with right at 50 to 60 volts right here on this pin right here, which then we're going to jump over to here and then to there with some 100 ohm resistors to create a virtual center tap for this 50-ish volts to lift the DC offset so that we have a nice difference between the cathode and the heater voltage so we don't run into problems. And I'll go over that on the schematic when I get ready to do that, but let's go ahead and solder this other connection right here. Like I said, on this amp, I've put these resistors down low so that we got plenty of room up here to put our other resistors in so it doesn't look quite as cluttered. So now we got that resistor like that. We got that resistor down there like that. We got our ground wire that's going over to our star ground point. And we got our capacitor here. So then this whole little mess will then get bolted down on this transformer screw. Then our two heater wires for the filaments for the 6.3 volt tubes get twisted up and soldered to these two terminals. I think we're going to go ahead and do that. That's probably good there. Cut these two off. Strip these back. Like that. Go and tin these two guys. Okay, got one side soldered on. Then we solder this one in. And that's probably one of the trickier things to solder in this whole amp is to get those soldered in place down in these lower holes, which isn't absolutely necessary, but I just think it looks neater. Because then when we get this all bolted down, I'm almost wondering if it would look better with that ground wire going over the top of these heater wires and kind of holding them down. I think it would, so I'm going to go like that. There we go. That looks really spiffy. So the rest of it's going to be really easy to like solder the stuff up here up high. And we can get this thing bolted down so that it doesn't move around on us. And then we can start working on the other tag strip. Okay, we got our first tag strip here wired up and with a little voltage divider and a capacitor like I wanted to do and have it a little more compact. We got our ground wire coming over here that's going to hook to our star ground point. As you can see, we got the paint scraped all off the chassis here. Let me see if I can show you a little better. Here we go. And this is where the second tag strip is going to go. And so I need to solder this ground wire over to this tag strip here so we have a good ground over here. And then we're going to put jumpers across these three terminals and make all of these grounds. And then these two are going to be our B plus coming out of the positive lead coming out of the choke. So we got this big cap here. It's going to go like that. So it's going to be going from these two positive terminals that are tied together to this negative terminal that's tagged across this whole strip here. And then this will be the star ground point for all of our other tag strips get grounded to. And then the center tap off of the transformer is going to be tied to this terminal right here. So the next step is going to be to solder this ground wire on here and then make up these little jumpers. And the jumpers I make up out of some solid core wire like this. And you just strip back a length of it, bend over a piece, then see about how far across it is to the next one. Bend that over, cut it off, and it sits in there. And the jumper comes in from the other side. And then we solder that all together. So let me get my soldering iron warmed up. So then we just come in here and solder up this ground jumper that's going across. There we go. Now we got this ground jumper and this little jumper soldered in. And then we need to make one more jumper that's going to go across from here to there. And then we have one last little jumper to make to go across these two terminals right here. Okay, and let's solder up these two last jumpers, pins. There we go, we got these three pins tied together, got these two tied together, and then this jumper goes over here to this ground, and even though it's bolted down, I've got this wire running straight over to our star ground point to get a good solid ground. Now I'm going to bolt this tag strip down and we can finish soldering up our stuff to it. So the next thing we need to do is we need to connect this to this terminal here. Actually, I think I'm going to tie it to the same terminal that the capacitor is being connected to. So we will strip this back, poke this through, bend that around like that. And then when we put this big capacitor in, we can solder it and that positive together at the same time. Then all we have left to do is hook up the center tap for the transformer, and we'll connect it to this terminal right here. It's the same thing. Clip that off. Strip that. Grip that around. And we'll solder this terminal up here first. And then this is going to be like our main star ground point. And then all the other tag strips are going to ground through here. Even though they're bolted to the chassis, they're all going to have wires pulled up to this star ground point. And then I just remembered too, we need to ground this pin over here on our little tag that we used on the rectifier tube to ground that first filtering capacitor. Solder this right here. There we go. Now we have this is the high voltage coming off the rectifier. It goes to the positive side of this cap. This is the negative side. And then this wire runs over here to our star ground point. So we have the negative side of this cap grounded. High voltage then goes through the choke, comes out to this terminal here. And then we're going to put a big capacitor across these two terminals. And then this is going to be where we pull all of our high voltage off of our power supply. So this will be the terminal with the filtered DC that's going to the rest of the amplifier. And again, I like having all the AC and all the filtering and chokes and everything being like in a line behind, like right here on the amplifier. So then, you know, this stuff is all isolated from the signal part that's way up there in the front. So it's the way I've designed all my amps, and so far it's worked well for me. So one of the last things we need to do is on this part is put this big filtering cap across these two terminals. Yeah, I kind of screwed up a little bit here. I should have put these two jumpers here on the back side so that this cap could sit flush up against the tag strip. Because right now, especially this one's getting in the way. Yeah, let me try to move those. And let me see if I can show you what I'm talking about here. We're trying to put this cap in place. I can't get it to go up against the tag strip because these two jumpers are in the way. And if they were on this back side, there wouldn't be a problem. So let me see if I can move those real quick without being a big headache. Okay, so that got us where I wanted to be. I think that's going to be a lot better with these two little jumpers moved to the back side of this tag strip. So now they're on the back side, and they won't interfere with this capacitor being fully engaged in those terminal strips. It just looks nicer. So the next thing I want to do is get my friend Mr. Pliobond and tack this big cap down to the chassis, then solder up these two terminals, and then we're done with the power supply. So let me get my glue out. Put a nice dollop of glue on the back of that cap. Let this tack up. And then I'm going to turn this around so y'all can see this a little better. Let me solder this terminal. And that one. And there we go. You can see now we have the center tap for the transformer there. This is all grounded to the chassis. This is our star ground point. Negative side of this big 220 UF 450 volt cap. It's grounded there. This wire here is our B plus positive high voltage coming off the choke. And this terminal here will be the high voltage DC that goes to the output transformer and then comes up here to another tag strip that has a filtering, decoupling capacitor network to then feed the input tube. So we're in good shape here. So that completes the power supply, and we'll power this thing up soon. Well, again, I hope some of y'all are enjoying this more kind of detailed step-by-step build process of the second monoblock, since we got the first one done and it seemed to perform so well. And we may be doing this one with a slightly different cathode resistor to run the tubes just a little hotter and see if that changes anything between the two channels. So that'll be something we're exploring here. We've got the power supply done. So now we can move on to doing the other tag strips. I can show you how I do my star grounding of all the other tag strips and kind of explain how I ground amplifiers to keep them quiet, not have any hum, and all that kind of stuff. So I hope you're enjoying this. If you are enjoying this series or enjoying my content, please subscribe to the channel. Please like the video. If you'd like to make a donation to help with future projects, there's a link in the description. And until next time, have a great day.